What's going on, guys? It's Ben with liftedimports.com. As usual, we're going to talk about some lifted Subaru stuff. And what I wanted to talk about today is just some general basic pitfalls that I feel like I see newcomers make when they get into the lifted Subaru thing. Now, I've made some of these mistakes, so hopefully you can learn from some of the experiences that I've had. So let's go ahead and jump into it. The first thing that I see people doing is they almost always want to save money in the process of outfitting their vehicle for off-roading. I see them trying to save money in the lift kit department. Now, I absolutely get it. Times are tough, money's hard to come by, but I'll see people spend, $2,000 on a rooftop tent, but then only want to spend $300 on a lift kit. And to me, I think that's absolutely crazy. You're not going to catch me skimping on tires, suspension, brakes, things that are vital to the correct operation of a vehicle. I'm not going to skimp on those. Your lift kit is literally connected to the suspension of your vehicle. It needs to function right. In my opinion, spending anywhere from $500 to $700 on a lift kit that is well made, well engineered, and run by a company with good customer service is invaluable. You're only going to need to buy the kit once. It's not a recurring expense, and it will save you so much headache if you just go with a good kit the first time. I can't tell you how many questions I've gotten from people trying to track down different issues that they're experiencing with like a $200 cheap eBay lift. My friend Patrick that runs Anderson Design and Fabrication, he gets phone calls all day of people trying to track down different issues that they're experiencing because they spent $150 on some Chinese lift kit. Put off the light bars for a couple months, save up a few bucks, do the lift kit right. I promise you it will take a lot of headache out of the process of modifying your car. The next mistake that I feel like I see a lot of people make is they will forget to budget for skid plates. Now, the way that Subarus are designed, in my opinion, is not really optimal for underbody protection. Since we don't have solid axles and our oil pans and transmission pans are pretty exposed, in my opinion, very important to have skid plates for the front oil pan, so the front skid plate. And then if you have an automatic or a CVT transmission, running a transmission skid plate as well. Rear diff skids are great. If you have the extra money, you can get one, but most rear diffs on Subarus are pretty robust. It's a pretty heavy duty item, but a rear skid on those is not a bad idea. It will help you slide off rocks and things like that a little bit easier. Now, the other thing with skid plates, they completely transformed the way that I felt when I went off-road. My confidence level went way up because in the back of your head, you're not worried. It doesn't matter if you bottom out on a boulder or smack into a rock or whatever. Your skid plates are going to handle that for you. And as far as skid plates, there's a lot of good stuff out there. My two favorite, the ones that I personally use, is either going to be Anderson Design and Fabrication or Primitive Racing. Those two, that's all that I've used ever since I've been in this whole thing. I absolutely love them. You can also look at companies like Rallytech, LP Aventure. I know there's some other new companies that are trying to come into the scene. You can check those out as well. Okay, the next big pitfalls that I see with new off-roaders, especially in the Subaru community, is tire selection. I see a lot of mistakes around tire selection. I see a lot of people not understanding how to convert or even knowing to convert tire sizes into overall diameter. People will be like, hey, do you think this, whatever tire will fit? And it's like, yo, dude, those are like 33s when you do the conversion. No, those are not going to fit on your GC8. Sorry. Understanding how to look up, what the overall diameter of a tire is, and then comparing that to what your current tire overall diameter is going to be super helpful to kind of give you a general idea of what it's going to look like if you go with a certain tire size. Now, I also see people thinking like, oh, I want to just go as big as possible with my tires. I want to go huge. I want to get, if I can stuff 31s under the Subaru, that's what I'm going to do. The bigger the tire, the better. And yes, in most cases with off-roading, tire size is where a massive amount of true ground clearance and true capability comes from. But with Subarus, we're very limited on the amount of tire diameter that our vehicles can handle. So you may be able to physically force a set of 31s or 33s under a certain Subaru that you've chopped up and cut the fenders and all that. But the fact that we don't have a low range T case, which I've talked about a ton, we just don't have them in our cars. These are all wheel drive, they're not four wheel drive. You don't have the option to engage a T case that gives you a lower gearing to take advantage of your engine's torque at low speeds. And so the car just pretty much becomes undrivable. There's no way to really re-gear our vehicles in any meaningful way. Even if you re-gear to a 444, which is what my vehicle has, without that low range, it's still not really any fun on the trails if you go overboard with tire size. I would encourage you to go somewhere in the middle with your tires. If you don't know what you should be looking for, feel free to ask somebody. Get in some of the different groups online. You can jump into the comments section on my videos. You can get on Instagram and find other like-minded people and start to look at their builds, see what they're doing, do a little bit of research. Before you get into people's DMs, look through their photos and see if you can find their tire size, because I'm almost positive they're going to get asked it at least once a week. But yeah, orient yourself to kind of what's going to be the most practical thing. Unless you absolutely don't care, you're going to want to just be somewhat moderate with your tire selection. You also don't need anything that's overly aggressive. I do like an aggressive mud terrain, but I don't daily drive my Forester. Okay, the next thing that I see people neglecting to do as new lifted Subaru owners is not connecting with other off-roaders. And when I say that, what I mean is feeling like there's some sort of rivalry between us and people that own real off-road vehicles. There's a couple reasons why I think it's important to connect with people that have real 4x4s. The first reason is the nature of off-roading in something that has four-wheel drive, that you can run 35s, 37s, 42s, that type of stuff. Those types of vehicles and that type of off-roading creates a lot of situations where you really have to know what you're doing. So in terms of recovery techniques, in terms of trail repairs, being able to repair a tire in the field or reseat a bead, things like that. Those are all things that I picked up from Jeep guys. And then the other thing that, in my opinion, is really fun is if you get out with dudes that are out there on straight axle swapped Toyotas, or dudes in XJs, YJs, TJs, whatever other Jeeps that are out there, they're gonna be capable enough to where you can really push your vehicle and see how far it'll go as a lifted Subaru, because you're gonna have those dudes that are gonna have no problem pulling you out. And that's actually how I started to test the limits of my Subaru, was I went out with the homie Kyle and he had a 4Runner, and man, I would just tag along with him and his buddies, and I would just see what the Subaru would do. And that's where I really cut my teeth on pushing the limits of these cars. So there's a couple benefits to it, and I just think there's this weird rivalry that I think people seem to think that there is. And yes, you're gonna run into people that are rude, and it just is what it is. That's part of life. But that doesn't mean that everybody that's not a Subaru owner is going to hate you. That doesn't mean that there's any kind of bad blood there. So don't hesitate to get out with other people regardless of what the car is, because at the end of the day, we're all outdoor enthusiasts, we're all car enthusiasts, we're all off-roaders at heart, and there's no reason why we can't all collaborate, learn from each other, and just have a good time together. Okay, the next big mistake that I see is a lack of recovery gear knowledge, right? So underestimating the importance of proper recovery technique and having good recovery gear on hand, and then knowing how to use each piece. Sometimes people will just order this stuff on Amazon, it shows up, they throw it in a bag, and it sits in the back of their Subaru. They've never used it because they don't know how to use it, and then when the stuff really hits the fan, that gear is essentially useless. So I think it's important to make sure you have recovery straps. I use kinetic recovery ropes. That's what I like. They are a lot less jarring on the vehicles. The other thing that I like to make sure that I have is soft shackles. Soft shackles are my absolute favorite way of connecting recovery gear to my vehicles. If you have a winch, that's cool. Not everybody has a winch or can afford a winch or has a way to properly mount it to their Subaru. That's totally okay. Obviously you're gonna wanna have things like a shovel and some sort of a jack. Like you guys know me, I love bottle jacks. I think bottle jacks are a fantastic tool to have out in the field for Subarus. Can't really use farm jacks on our cars very easily just because of the nature of how they're designed. There's no real good place unless you have custom rock sliders, custom bumpers front and back. There's not really a good spot for you to get a farm jack or a high lift jack and get it up off the ground. So in my opinion, a bottle jack is the next best thing. Subarus don't really have rated recovery points on them, but if you are going to do any sort of pulling on the Subaru, best place that I've found to pull on them is actually the tie downs that are essentially integrated into the front subframe or the rear subframe. You're typically going to have 2 in front, 2 in the rear, but they're under the car, not in front of it. Again, they're not rated recovery points, but it's much safer than pulling on those little eyelets that are just waiting to become a missile. And then the final, and I think most common thing that I see is people overestimating the capability of the Subaru platform as an off-road vehicle. What I mean by this is people just not having a very realistic view of what these cars can and will do on the trails. Yes, you can take them off-road. Yes, you can take them on some pretty challenging trails. Yes, you can take them in deep snow and have a great time. But I see a lot of people that they have this thought in their head that, well, if I just put the biggest tire that I possibly can on this Subaru and I get a, a torque locker, which torque lockers are great. They'll also, just think like, oh, I'm gonna do all these different mods and dump, $5,000 to make the car as capable as possible. But even the most highly modified Subaru that's still based on the Subaru platform that hasn't been swapped onto a 4x4, I'm sorry, just is never going to be able to do what a solid axle 4x4 with a low range T case is going to be able to do with minimal mods. I own a lifted Jeep XJ, and I'm sorry, but there's no comparison when you really get into the crazy stuff. The Jeep will literally crawl up a wall. My Jeep will essentially be buried up to the doors in deep snow and I can get out. Each one has its purpose. The Subaru is obviously way more comfortable, more reliable, more fun to drive, saves gas, and can still be used for camping and that sort of thing. Probably costs you a lot less money, but I think a lot of people have never really driven an actual 4x4 and don't really understand kind of what makes each one good at what it's designed for. So I would encourage you that if you have other friends that drive 4x4s, get out and do a ride along with them. See like what those cars can do and understand just kind of the main difference. Because you may want to get a 4x4. If you're looking for a wheeler, something you can actually go out and like bounce around in the rocks and get into like really crazy stuff, a 4x4 might be the right decision for you. Me personally, I just decided to add a 4x4 into my collection so that I could get out and connect with some of the local dudes out here that do some pretty crazy stuff. Nevertheless, if you modify these cars mindfully, take your time, do the proper research, and have a realistic expectation and approach to your modifications, you can absolutely have a ton of fun in a lifted Subaru. It's some of the most fun that I've ever had in a car, but I've been owning Subarus for almost 20 years, 15, 20 years at this point. I honestly can't remember. Gosh, let me think about that. Yeah, I guess it has been about 15 or so years. Maybe 16 years. Been driving these cars for a long time, been lifting them for a long time, and I absolutely love them. They're great cars. You can have so much fun. The community's amazing. They're dependable, they're fun, they handle great. But I hope this is helpful and just gave you something to think about. If you want more information about lifting your Subaru and you want to see some other builds, you can head over to the liftedimports.com website. A lot of good build features, a lot of good information that we've compiled over the years. You can check that out. And until next time, I'll see you guys out on the trails.